Welcome to another Blues Reaction podcast here at Arch City Sports. I'm your host, AJ Nance. Today we're going to cover two games from this past weekend. Saturday afternoon's exciting overtime thriller victory versus the Boston Bruins, and then Sunday evening's loss versus the Carolina Hurricanes. A tough back-to-back night travel for the boys. We're going to cover all that today, but of course, before we get into everything, make sure to like and subscribe if you are listening or viewing over on YouTube. Of course, go follow us on all social media, Instagram, TikTok, and over there on Twitter/X. And of course, if you're also listening to this on Spotify or Amazon Music, follow and rate the podcast. Leave a comment on there. Leave a comment on YouTube if you're over there. It helps get the engagement going, so I really appreciate that. But like I said, a win on Saturday afternoon, a 3-2 victory versus the Boston Bruins. It was a noon puck drop, which is kind of interesting. Interesting timing for the guys. It started off really well, actually. The Bruins, who are a team that have really struggled earlier this year, not their normal powerhouse that they always are, they were not getting a lot of shots on net. That was a lot of because of us. Again, just like the win we had the other night, blocking shots, being very involved, very engaged defensively, which is really good to see, really connected. They only had 17 shots the entire game. Bennington went 15 for 17. It was a 3-2 win in overtime. A couple highlights from this one: Radek Faksa, a goal in the first period to get things started, and then an amazing assist late in this one to Nathan Walker to tie it in the third period. It was 2-1 going into the third period. I should mention that was Radek Faksa's second goal of the year, but it was late in this one. Under 10 minutes left in this game, or about 10 minutes left, and Radek Faksa right behind the net, a no-look backhand pass, one of the best passes you'll see from a Blues player this year, to Nathan Walker, who was right in front of the net, and he drove it in to tie it at 2-2. We take this one into overtime, and Brayden Schenn, it looked just like his game winner in game one of the season versus the Seattle Kraken. Down the left wing, a perfect shot. His third goal of the year and his second game-winning goal. What I thought was interesting with this game is Nathan Walker, who also scored his second goal of the season. Both of his goals, big meaning. Both of them were game-tying goals in the third period. His first goal, obviously tying the game in the third period versus the Philadelphia Flyers, which we ended up losing in regulation a week and a half ago or so. And this one tying it, which led into a 2-point worthy victory in overtime. Brayden Schenn, now only 3 goals on the year, but 2 of his goals have a lot of meaning as well. So kind of interesting there. Radek Faksa, as I mentioned, only 2 goals now. Nathan Walker, 2 goals. Brayden Schenn, 3 goals. When you look up and down the roster, without Broberg, without Robert Thomas, 2 of your playmaking, probably biggest playmaking players, the goals are not really there right now. Kyrou has 5. Jake Neighbors has 5 after that game versus Carolina. And then Buchnevich also has 5. And they're all leading the team right now. So it was really good to get a win in this one, though. I think the defense stood out more than anything. That fourth line with Faksa, Walker, and Toropchenko really stood out in that Bruins game, but also really stood out in the Carolina game at times too. They've been providing a lot of energy, a lot of spark, and that's really good to see. Defensively, Corey Schooneman was making his Blues debut this weekend. We signed him in the offseason, and he was matched up with Matthew Kessel in the Hurricanes matchup. He was kind of split in time with Perunovic on that second defensive pairing with Justin Falk against the Bruins. Corey Schooneman didn't put up any numbers this weekend when it comes to box score numbers, but he looked really, really smooth. A couple really nice zone entries. His passes were right on the tape majority of the time. He looked really, really solid. And him and Kessel had a lot of chemistry. It really looked like on that third defensive pairing, making some really nice crisp passes to one another. And that was really good to see. Of course, Schooneman filling in for P.O. Joseph, who has not been playing very well, and then he's been a little banged up, and everybody's a little little banged up. It's not been a ideal start to the 2024-2025 season, but it was a good win versus the Boston Bruins. That got us our 8th victory of the season. And then we roll into Carolina, who has played very well this year, has played very well the last few years, and is just looking to get over the hump and win the Stanley Cup once and for all here. I thought it was interesting how we started this one. We started right off the puck drop with Foxa, Walker, and Toropchenko, which I thought was a great move by Bannister, because that's the line that was creating everything in that game versus the Bruins. That's how we got every goal besides that OT winner. Both goals in regulation from that fourth line. Foxa obviously scored, Toropchenko with 2 assists, and Walker scored as well, as I mentioned. Corey Schooneman also, as I mentioned before, really looked good in this Carolina game. I didn't see a whole lot of him in that Boston game, but I kept my eye on him in this Carolina matchup. And like I mentioned, him and Matthew Kessel, really good chemistry on that third line defensive pairing. First goal of the game came at the 14-minute mark, 6 minutes into this one. It started with Kyrou, Neighbors, and Booch, that top line for us, forechecking hard. We had it in their zone off a very good zone entry. I believe it was Schooneman that passed it up to Kyrou. It was definitely Schooneman that passed it. I believe it was Kyrou that made that zone entry. Carolina deflected it out of the zone, got a clearance, but didn't get it deep enough. Perunovic, who was on the ice at the time, brought it back in, made a nice pass to have another zone entry, and then a kind of a bouncing puck. Buchnevich, it's really hard to describe it without seeing it yourself, but Buchnevich, nice little active stick to just keep it, poked it back to, I believe it was maybe Perunovic or Falk might have been there on that blue line, but we kept the puck in. Carolina ended up getting it back. They tried to clear it, but it went right off Kyrou's chest. He balanced it right in front of him. It ended up being a really quick 2-on-1 situation. He fired it right over to Jake Neighbors, and Neighbors put it in the back of the net for his 5th goal of the season. Really active sticks from that group, especially early in this game. The first period until the last minute, the first 19 minutes of the first period was some of the best Blues hockey I've seen this year. Really active, really energetic, a lot of scoring, several scoring chances. Nathan Walker had a great backhand pass to, I believe it was Toropchenko right in front of the net, and we couldn't bury that one. Kyrou had a couple chances. He hit 3 or 4 goal posts this weekend alone. But I was really impressed with the active sticks, and just trying to keep that play alive there, and ended up being worth it with the goal. Jake Neighbors, as I mentioned, his 5th goal of the season. That ends a 9-game goalless streak for him. Jordan Kyrou, his 11th assist. His 6-game point streak ended versus Boston, so he starts up a new one in this one. As I was talking about, just the lack of shots on net was very impressive in the Bruins game. The Bruins only with 17 shots on Binnington. We had Hofer obviously going in this one on the back-to-back. And the Canes did not have their first shot on net until 7 minutes in to this game. I thought it was interesting what we did with our defensive pairings, kind of mixing and matching right now. Obviously, Suter and Parayko have been running that top defensive pairing, but after that, it was pretty consistent with what we saw today. Was Perunovic getting the nod to go on that second defensive pairing with Falk, and then Schooneman and Kessel on that third line. As I mentioned, their chemistry was really solid. Perunovic getting the nod is extremely well-deserved to be on that second defensive pairing right now with Justin Falk. He's been playing very well, a lot better defensively than what I thought he would be, blocking a lot of shots. He had several blocked shots this weekend. I believe he had 3 in the game versus the Hurricanes and a couple in the game versus the Bruins. Just very active from Perunovic. He was one of my 3 stars from a couple nights ago, and I'm going to go through my 3 stars here in a couple minutes from the weekend games, and he was definitely worth considering being on there, being elevated into a higher role. He has stepped in perfectly, and I've been really impressed with Scott Perunovic. More than anything defensively. We know what he can do, smooth passing defenseman offensively, but defensively, he's been really standing out to me, laying his body on the line, being active, And that's really good to see from the young defenseman who's finally getting a chance to play every single day, with Krug obviously being out the whole year and a lot of other injuries happening right now. With 1 minute left in the first period, Oscar Sundqvist, as much as I love the guy, and I think he's a huge piece on our third and fourth line, he hurt us once again. The other night in that OT loss versus the Buffalo Sabres, it was his penalty at the end of the regulation really hurt us, obviously going 4-on-3 in overtime. The Sabres won in that one because of the Oscar Sundqvist penalty. He had a holding penalty with 1 minute left in the first period in this one. And versus great teams like this, it was kind of a ticky-tack call, but versus great teams like Carolina, you just can't let that happen. And they capitalized off it. They made us pay for it. Nachos to Svechnikov for a power play goal with about 20 or so seconds left in the first period, and they almost got another one before that period ended. And it just felt like the momentum we had from the start, coming off a very gritty win versus Boston, a very strong first period up until that moment. It felt like that kind of brought us down a little bit, and for the rest of the game, we just did not have that, I don't want to say excitement, but that kind of grittiness, the flying everywhere effort. We just did not have that for the rest of this one. And periods 2 and 3 did not look like period 1 whatsoever. The Canes are a team that they swarm everywhere. Any type of rebound that Hofer was giving up, a bunch of red jerseys were around, and that's what great teams do. They feed off of pucks just bouncing around. They're right on it every single time. That's what Carolina was doing. They ended up beating us in this one 4-1. Hofer was 20 for 24 in net. We hung around for a while. It was a 3-1 game in the third period with throughout the whole third period it was 3-1, but a couple minutes, 8, 9, 10 minutes left, there were still chances. Pucks were kind of bouncing around that we could have capitalized, but we just did not get it done in this one. Going into this weekend, I said it would be really nice to get at least 2 points, 3 points or more would be awesome, but at least 2 points in these two matchups, and we got that with that overtime win versus Boston on Saturday afternoon. So not super pleased with this weekend, but I'm content with it, with where we're at right now. I know a lot of Blues fans have given up on the season, and I'm not completely giving up. I think there's a lot to still watch with this squad. Yes, we're not a super exciting offensive team to watch, but defensively and just personnel-wise, seeing how certain guys play is very interesting. So I definitely recommend to continue to watch if you're a Blues fan. We will get Robert Thomas back in a couple weeks here, and also Broberg, who hopefully sooner than later. But an overtime win on Saturday afternoon, a regulation loss 4-1 to the Hurricanes on Sunday evening. Let's get into our 3 stars from the weekend. Starting with star number 3. I'll start with number 3. I'm going to give it to Braden Shen for his overtime winner. He also had 2 block shots this weekend. He's been playing a lot better. With Thomas and Broberg out, I talked about other guys really need to step up the scoring, and he's played very well in these last couple games. Going to give him the 3rd star. Also a cool stat on Braden Shen. He is now 2nd all-time in St. Louis Blues history for overtime winners. 1 behind Vladimir Tarasenko, who has 10. Braden Shen with 9 overtime winners in his career. I thought that was a very interesting stat when they showed that on the broadcast. My number 2 star from this weekend, I'm going to give it to a guy that I was lucky enough to interview a year or so ago, and I think we're going to plan on having him on this podcast sooner or later here. That's Nathan Walker. Obviously, that game-tying goal versus the Boston Bruins, but he had 6 block shots this weekend. The dude was feisty, man. I mean, flying around all over the place. Really good to see from Nathan Walker, who's finally getting his chance to play every single day. His plus-minus was even this weekend. And the number 1 star, I was thinking about giving it to Nathan Walker. And I mentioned it, I think, earlier in this episode, but I did really consider giving Corey Schueneman a chance to be in these 3 stars. I thought he played really well this weekend. But with all that being said, my number 1 star is Radek Faksa. Yes, he didn't do a whole lot in that Hurricanes game, but he was all of our offense in that Boston Bruins matchup. A goal and an assist, a tremendous backhand pass. Like I mentioned, one of the best Blues passes you'll see all year. 2 points in that one, a plus-minus of even also from this weekend. So overall, not ecstatic with the results this weekend, but really good win against Boston. Wish we could at least gotten 1 point versus Carolina. But we move on from here, a off day on Monday, which is today when you're listening to this. And Tuesday, it's going to be one of the toughest matchups we're going to have moving forward here, and that's Minnesota, who is playing really well right now. They're a wagon right now. Really hard to see us getting both points in that one. Hopefully, we can get at least one. But I appreciate you guys. Appreciate all you guys for listening and viewing this reaction podcast. Make sure to go check out our SLU basketball reaction podcast. And of course, as I mentioned at the very beginning, go follow us on all social media for daily St. Louis sports content. Share the podcast with a friend. I really appreciate you guys listening, and I will see you guys for the next reaction podcast, which will be Wednesday morning after the Blues play the Wild, and of course for our normal scheduled episode on Friday, and then SLU's reaction as well. So I will see you guys then. Appreciate it.